Alright guys, we're going to finish up what we started last week and talk about all the plugins that I use, some go-to plugins I use, starting with Kontakt. Let's get started. Okay, I want to run back and talk about some of the plugins that go into Kontakt 5. This is a phenomenal, I keep saying about everything, but this is a really good engine for creating instruments. So a lot of third-party plugins will create their instruments within Kontakt, and you don't have to have the full version of Kontakt. You can actually just purchase or download, not purchase, you can download for free the Kontakt, what they call it, the Kontakt player, and then you can run your third-party plugins in it. I happen to have the full version of Kontakt because I wanted a lot of the instruments in Kontakt, and this is an older version, but I still use it sometimes. It's got some great urban beats in it. If I need some, just if I'm doing a hip-hop or something that I need some inspiration for a groove, this is fantastic. The choirs aren't that great, but they've got a lot of good band instruments and stuff, orchestral instruments, like if you just need a quick clarinet, or if you need a trumpet here, or a cool sax. In fact, I use their saxophones on one of my projects to create a really nice riff on a drop I was doing in a groove. So anyway, some great world instruments as well. So their full version's cool. It's optional. It's not a must-have by any means, but it's good. Evolve Mutations. If you do a lot of cinematic stuff, Evolve is incredible for big loops and drums and out of this world sound effects. It's very edgy, and it's kind of a mixture between sampled instruments and electronic. It's got a lot of fuzz and grit, and it sounds so good. And they've got some huge hits in there. So check out their instruments, and they've got percussive hits, they've got loops, they've got stings, and all kinds of stuff in there. So I have the first and second version. I like them both. I've got a retro synth. This is just for some cool analog and cool sounding pads and effects, and I can drop those in and play those. They're very 1980s, but sometimes you need 1980s. So those are cool. Down here I have something called Signal. Now Signal and Rev are both made from Output. Love both of these instruments. Highly recommend both of them. Probably Signal more so than Rev. Rev is awesome. It's made up of sounds that are all reversed, but for some reason I don't have a lot of uses for it. But I can see that a lot of people would. It gives those great, you can basically use it as a sampler to throw things in and reverse them. Signal is great because it's just incredible sounds that are big pulses, and it's basically a pulse engine that you can create all kinds of sounds with. So really like this instrument right here. I'm using that a whole lot right now. Cinebrass is a really great brass instrument. So if you want horns and trumpets, and this is all recorded on stages, and it's sampled real horns that sound phenomenal. They sound like you're in an orchestra. If you just wanted a quick trumpet to do a dry solo for, I don't know, some ragtime or something, this is not the instrument. But if you're doing something orchestrational with strings, it is the instrument for that. Highly recommend it. Check out my SoundCloud if you want to hear some more of that stuff. The strings I use, a lot of people ask me what kind of strings I use because they sound so good. I use LA scoring strings. This is one of the most amazing string instruments. I've got both version 2 and their Legato Sordino version number 2. Sordino strings are like very muted strings. In fact, they put some kind of mute over the strings to create a sound that's often used in cinematic scores. Both of these have lots and lots of patches. They are a very complex instrument. They sound amazing, but I literally spent the summer of 2012 just learning this instrument. It's very complicated, but they sound great. So if you're looking for strings and you're willing to put the time in, I highly recommend them. There are some other string instruments now that are a little bit easier to use. If you're just trying to get a quick string on something, I wouldn't recommend this. But if you want something very in-depth and very big and sounds like real stages, they have real stage emulators from famous stages around LA where they've recorded a lot of movies and stuff like that. Also, there are instruments that play within Kontakt, but they don't have a cover page in the library tabs, and that's because they didn't want to pay Kontakt or Native Instruments the license fee for having their I don't know, their cover in that. So you have to actually search for it manually. Not a big deal, but it's a little bit annoying. But there are some instruments that I absolutely love. So let me just show you one that I like a whole lot. I really highly recommend this. I use this. It's called Drums of War 2. Kind of a funny name, but their stuff is amazing. And they separate all the drums out, but like their taikos are just incredible. If you're familiar with taiko drums, they're large Asian drums, but all of these just sound really, really good. Really recommend these. I use taikos and daikos and junjuns and frame drums and hang drums and medals. I use a lot of these instruments on cinematic and orchestration stuff. You're going to really, really love this, and it's not very expensive at all. It's like $49 or something for drums and Duo 2. And it's made by Cinesamples, so check that one out. I have a lot of stuff by Sound Iron. I don't use these very much, but they have. I actually won this in a competition. There's some Sound Iron instruments. They have a lot of apocalyptic percussion and symbology, so a lot of stuff off of cymbals and cool twine basses, and just really, really cool, interesting instruments. I really like their stuff as well. They always make solid instruments, but they're always very odd, and I don't use them a lot just because they're off the beaten path sometimes. Then lastly, Sonokinetic makes some instruments that are just insanely good. Their instruments, in fact, Gediz is an instrument of a male vocalist that I actually had the privilege of making a demo for. And they're out of Amsterdam and London, and they cannot make better stuff. You're going to love this kind of stuff because it's very Gladiator-esque. I have one called Aaliyah, and you can check it out here. And she sounds like this. The Kamenci, which is a instrument, which is a little stringed instrument. It's kind of like a little violin, Middle Eastern violin. It sounds amazing. And then I also have Rojan, which I use a whole lot. And it's another female vocalist. I think it's from Turkey. Forgive me if it's a little bit wrong, but it is, her vocals are phenomenal as well, and they sound like this. Got some really, really interesting stuff, and they're breaking grounds in the plug-in world that I recommend, especially for cinematic composers. If you're using Ableton Live, you might want to check out Max for Live. Max for Live is basically open software that once you buy the program, the install, people can create sounds and effects and instruments, and then you can just use them. You basically go to the Max Instrument website and download whatever algorithm someone's made of an instrument, and you upload it and you can just play their instruments. It's a way of sharing instruments. So check out Max for Live. It's phenomenal as well. I've used many plugins and instruments from Max that people have just written on the fly. So that's it, guys. Those are the third-party plugins I use that are sort of my go-to plugins for as far as instruments and plugins and audio effects. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, hit me up. Let me know. Call me. Don't call me. Just hit me up with an email or something like that. As always, stay frosty. Come back next week. Hit the subscribe button and keep writing. Later.